The certified letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I had the courage to open it. Inside was the official transfer of ownership for Callahan Construction, the company I had helped build for 12 years, working 74-hour weeks without complaint. The document showed everything now belonged to my sister Paula. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "We should talk about your role moving forward. Paula needs support behind the scenes. Family dinner Sunday?" I felt my entire future crumbling through my fingers like sand. I never imagined my family would betray me like this. For as long as I can remember, Callahan Construction had been my destiny. My grandfather Thomas started the company with nothing but a pickup truck and a toolbox back in 1972. He built it into a respectable local business before my father Jackson took over in 1998. I was 10 years old then, already spending weekends at job sites, learning how to read blueprints while other kids played video games. By 14, I was working summer jobs at the company, hauling materials and cleaning up sites. Dad would point to buildings around town and say, "One day you'll be in charge of projects like these, Bryce." When it came time for college, there was no question about my path. I pursued civil engineering at State University specifically to benefit the company, while my sister Paula took marketing at a private arts college in California. After graduation, I started at the bottom. Despite being the owner's son, I learned every aspect of the business, from estimating costs to managing subcontractors. I endured the teasing from workers who thought I had it easy, proving myself day after day with my knowledge and work ethic. Within 5 years, I was managing our largest projects, often the first to arrive and last to leave. My typical week was exhausting but fulfilling. Mondays started with 6 a.m. site inspections, followed by contractor meetings and problem solving until well past dinner. Tuesdays and Wednesdays were filled with client meetings, budget reviews, and putting out the inevitable fires that came with construction work. Thursdays I handled permit issues and regulatory compliance, while Fridays were for planning the following week and checking in on all active projects. Saturdays were my half days, only working until 2 or 3 in the afternoon. Sundays were supposed to be my day off, but I was always on call. 74 hours was a conservative estimate of my typical work week. Through it all, Dad dropped consistent hints about the future. "When you take over someday," he would say, or, "This will be your decision eventually." Mom would smile proudly whenever Dad talked this way, patting my shoulder with approval. I believed them completely. Why wouldn't I? I had shaped my entire life around this promise. Meanwhile, Paula had spent her 20s bouncing between marketing jobs in Los Angeles, occasionally sending home photos from beach parties and music festivals. Don't get me wrong, I loved my sister. We had always gotten along well enough, though our different lifestyles created natural distance. I was genuinely happy when she announced she was moving back home 3 years ago after breaking up with her longtime boyfriend. Dad immediately offered her a position handling our marketing and client outreach. I welcomed her to the team, even spent weekends helping her move into her new apartment. Paula brought fresh energy to our brand, redesigning our outdated website and creating sleeker proposals. She had a natural charm that clients responded to, but she also maintained regular 9 to 5 hours and took all her vacation time. I never resented this. We had different roles, different strengths. I handled the complex logistics and technical challenges while she made things look pretty. It seemed like a perfect balance. My dedication to the company came at a personal cost. 2 years ago, my fiancée Allison had finally had enough of my constant cancellations and late nights. "You're married to that company, Bryce," she said, returning my grandmother's ring. "There's no room for me." I let her walk away because, in my mind, the sacrifice would be worth it when I eventually took over. The Westridge development deal was my crowning achievement. A 12-building commercial complex worth over $4 million in contracts. It had taken me 8 months of relationship building and detailed proposals to land. The developer, Scott Westridge, was notoriously demanding, but we connected over our shared experiences as second-generation businessmen. "I trust you, Bryce," he told me when signing the contracts. "Your attention to detail makes me confident this will be done right." 2 months ago, Dad started making comments about big changes coming and planning for the future. He scheduled more frequent meetings with our company lawyer, Kevin, and our CFO, Frank. Whenever I asked about these meetings, Dad would smile and say, "All in good time, son." Last week, Dad called a formal family dinner to discuss the future of Callahan Construction. Mom prepared Dad's favorite pot roast and set the dining room table with the good china we only used on special occasions. As I drove to their house that Sunday evening, I felt a surge of excitement. This had to be it, the moment I had been working toward my entire adult life. Dad was finally going to announce my partnership or presidency. At 32, I was ready to help take the company to the next level. I had no idea I was driving straight into the biggest disappointment of my life. The family home looked exactly as it always had, a 4-bedroom colonial that Dad had renovated himself when I was in high school. The porch light cast a warm glow as I parked my truck in the driveway. Paula's silver BMW was already there, parked in the spot where my childhood basketball hoop once stood. Mom answered the door with a tight smile, hugging me with trembling hands. "Your father is in his study with Paula," she said, taking my jacket. "They'll be out in a minute. Help me finish setting the table." The dining room was immaculate, candles already lit despite the early evening sunlight still streaming through the windows. Mom had even brought out the crystal water glasses, a wedding gift they only used on holidays and milestone celebrations. My stomach fluttered with anticipation. "Big night, huh?" I asked, arranging the silverware. Mom nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your father has put a lot of thought into this decision." Before I could probe further, Dad and Paula emerged from his study, both looking solemn yet somehow excited. Paula wore a crisp blazer I hadn't seen before, looking more corporate than her usual style. Dad clapped his hands together as they entered. "Let's eat first," he announced. "Business is better discussed on a full stomach." Dinner conversation remained superficial, focusing on neighborhood gossip and the unseasonably warm spring weather. Paula seemed unusually quiet, picking at her food while Dad dominated the conversation. Mom kept refilling wine glasses with mechanical precision. Finally, as Mom served her homemade apple pie, Dad cleared his throat and stood at the head of the table. "As you both know, I've been thinking about succession planning for Callahan Construction," he began, his voice taking on the formal tone he used in business meetings. "I'm not getting any younger, and it's time to look to the next generation." My heart raced. This was it. The company needs fresh leadership, new ideas to compete in today's market, Dad continued. "After careful consideration and many discussions with our advisors, I've made a decision about who will lead Callahan Construction into the future." He turned toward Paula with a proud smile. "Paula will be taking over as president and majority owner, effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at Dad, waiting for the punchline, the explanation, anything that would make this make sense. But he continued speaking, his words becoming distant and muffled as blood rushed in my ears. "The paperwork has already been filed," he said, oblivious to my shock. "Paula will own 60% of the company, with your mother and I retaining 30% and 10% allocated to you, Bryce. 10%. After 12 years of 74-hour weeks. After sacrificing my personal life. After bringing in our biggest clients. But I finally managed. My voice barely audible. I thought, we always talked about me taking over." Dad's expression softened with what looked like pity. "Bryce, you're incredibly valuable to the company. Your technical knowledge is unmatched. But Paula's better with people. The business needs a people person at the helm, someone who can bring in new clients and represent us in the community." Mom reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "You can still help from behind the scenes, Bryce. Your technical knowledge is invaluable. You'll be the technical director." Reporting to Paula. My younger sister, who had been with the company for 3 years compared to my 12. Paula cleared her throat and launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "I want to thank you both for this opportunity. I promise to honor the Callahan legacy while bringing fresh perspectives to the business. Bryce, I'm counting on your continued dedication. We make a great team, with my vision and your technical expertise." My vision, your expertise. The subtext was clear. I was the worker bee. She was the queen. Was this always the plan? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Of course not, Dad said quickly. But over the last year, seeing Paula's impact on our client relationships and company image, it became clear she has the leadership qualities needed. I thought about all the nights I'd spent troubleshooting construction problems while Paula posted company updates on social media from home. I remembered missing my best friend's wedding to handle an emergency at the Westridge site, while Paula took a long weekend in wine country. I thought about last Christmas when I came in during the holiday shutdown to fix a billing error while Paula posted family photos from our parents' living room. I see, was all I could manage. We're still family, Mom said, her voice pleading. Nothing changes that. Everything had already changed. I sat through the rest of dinner in a daze, mechanically congratulating Paula and nodding at Dad's enthusiastic descriptions of future expansion plans. Paula avoided my eyes, focusing intently on her barely touched pie. I drove home in silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the sound of my world collapsing around me. At home, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat on my balcony, staring at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text message from Frank, our CFO. Heard the news from Paula 3 weeks ago. Sorry they just told you now. Wanted to reach out but was sworn to secrecy. 3 weeks. They had planned this for at least 3 weeks without telling me. How many others knew before I did? How many people had watched me working myself to exhaustion, knowing I was building something that would never be mine? Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, I lay awake wondering how I could face walking back into that building tomorrow. The office felt different the next morning. Same furniture, same lighting, same coffee smell, but utterly transformed by my new reality. I noticed sympathetic glances from employees who already knew about the change. Janet from accounting gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze as I passed. Tyler from the estimating department quickly averted his eyes when I looked his way. An email had gone out to all staff, announcing Paula's promotion and my new role as technical director. My office belongings had already been moved from the corner office that had been mine for 5 years to a smaller space down the hall. Paula's name was on my old door, the vinyl lettering still bubbling from recent application. Dad called a meeting at 9 to discuss the transition plan. I sat across from him and Paula in the conference room, nodding mechanically as they outlined my diminished responsibilities. Project oversight would now require Paula's approval. Major decisions would be made by her with my input. Client relationships would primarily be handled by Paula, with me providing technical support as needed. This plays to both your strengths, Dad insisted. Paula has such natural charisma with clients, and you're so good with the details, Bryce. Paula smiled, phone buzzing constantly with congratulatory messages. I'm thinking of redecorating the main office, she said, something more modern to reflect our forward-thinking approach. By afternoon, Paula had sent a company-wide email about exciting changes coming to Callahan Construction. She referenced continuing the client-focused approach that has landed us accounts like Westridge Development, as though she had been the one working nights and weekends to secure that contract. My name wasn't mentioned once. I found myself in the break room, staring blankly at the coffee machine when Trent Anderson, our longest-serving project manager, approached. Hell of a thing, he said quietly. Everyone's pretty shocked. You didn't know beforehand? I asked. Heard rumors last week. Didn't believe them. He shook his head. 30 years I've worked for your dad. Never thought he'd make a call like this. Makes 2 of us, I replied. What are you going to do? It was the question I'd been asking myself all night. What could I do? Walking away from 12 years of building this company felt impossible. Staying felt unbearable. For now, my job, I answered. Whatever that is now. Sleep continued to elude me that week. I would lie awake replaying my parents' words. Paula's better with people. Help from behind the scenes. I thought about the Westridge contract, how Scott had specifically requested me as his point of contact. Now Paula would be taking those meetings. Speaking of Westridge, they called the following Wednesday. Scott sounded concerned. Heard about the leadership change, he said. Wanted to check if you're still overseeing our project. I'll be involved, I said carefully. Paula will be the primary contact going forward. A pause. I see. We signed with Callahan because of you, Bryce. Your attention to detail, your understanding of our vision. I appreciate that, Scott. I'll still be consulting on technical aspects. Consulting, he repeated. Well, I guess we'll see how it goes. After hours that same day, I noticed errors in the proposal Paula had drafted for a new residential development. The material estimates were off by 20%, and the timeline failed to account for permit processing delays. I stayed late correcting the mistakes, sending her the revised version with diplomatic notes about the changes. The next morning, I discovered she had submitted the original version anyway. When I questioned her, Paula waved dismissively. The clients don't understand those technical details, Bryce. The presentation is what matters, and my version looks cleaner. That afternoon, I was explicitly uninvited from a meeting with the City Planning Commission that I had previously always attended. Too many people might overwhelm them, Paula explained. Dad and I have it covered. I retreated to my new, smaller office, trying to focus on the engineering specs for an upcoming project, when I overheard Paula on the phone with a potential client in the hallway. We're finally modernizing now that I'm in charge, she said loudly. My brother was stuck in outdated methods. You'll see a real difference in how we operate. Something hardened inside me at that moment. The sister I had welcomed back, helped move in, and trained in our business was now actively undermining me. The parents who had raised me to value hard work and family loyalty had betrayed both principles, and I was still showing up every day, taking it, fixing their mistakes behind the scenes. For what? 10% ownership of what had always been promised to me. The privilege of watching my life's work being mismanaged. That night, I finally slept. Not peacefully, but with a clarity that had been missing since that fateful dinner. Something had to change. And it wouldn't be them. It would be me. The breaking point came during Thursday's board meeting. I presented data showing our timeline for the Riverfront Plaza project was too aggressive, given supply chain issues affecting concrete delivery. We need to add 3 weeks to the schedule, I explained, showing a detailed analysis of recent delivery patterns. Otherwise, we risk penalties for missing deadlines. Paula dismissed my concerns with a wave. The supplier promised me they'll prioritize our order. We're not changing anything. Clients hate delays. They hate missed deadlines more, I countered. The data clearly shows. The data doesn't account for my personal relationship with the supplier, Paula interrupted. We're sticking with the original timeline. Next item. Dad nodded along, seemingly impressed with Paula's confidence rather than concerned about her disregard for facts. I fell silent, making notes, and watching the company I loved making decisions that would inevitably lead to problems. That evening, my Uncle Gary called. Dad's younger brother had worked for Callahan Construction until starting his own smaller contracting business 10 years ago after a disagreement with Dad. Heard about what happened, he said without preamble. Your dad's making a mistake, just like he did with me. You don't think Paula can handle it? I asked, curious about his perspective. Paula's smart, but she doesn't have your experience or commitment. Jack's letting personal dynamics cloud his business judgment. Again, he paused. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, I admitted. Well, when you figure it out, call me. I might have some suggestions. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet. I calculated all the unpaid overtime I'd worked over 12 years. At a conservative estimate, I'd given the company over 8,000 hours of free labor, worth approximately $400,000 at market rates for someone with my qualifications. Then I calculated what my actual market value would be at another construction firm. With my experience and education, I could easily command a salary 30% higher than what I currently made, plus proper benefits and ownership potential. The numbers told a clear story. I was being taken advantage of, and had been for years, all based on a promise that had proven empty. The next morning, I contacted Andrea Winters, a headhunter who had reached out to me several times over the years. Her excitement was palpable. Bryce Callahan, finally, give me 48 hours, and I'll have offers for you to consider. That weekend, I drafted my resignation letter. It was straightforward and professional, giving the standard 2 weeks' notice. No accusations, no bitterness on paper. Just a clean break. Sunday afternoon, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. They were in the backyard, Dad grilling while Mom arranged flowers on the patio table. Paula was nowhere to be seen. "Bryce, what a nice surprise," Mom said, hugging me. Her smile faltered when she saw my expression. I handed Dad the sealed envelope. "My resignation, effective 2 weeks from tomorrow." Dad stared at the envelope without opening it. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't quit." "I can, and I am. This is just an emotional reaction," Mom said, placing her hand on my arm. "You need time to adjust to the changes." "I've had time. I've made my decision." Dad's face reddened. "You're overreacting. This is about what's best for the company." "No, it's about what's best for Paula," I replied evenly. "And now I'm doing what's best for me." "What about the family?" Mom pleaded. "Think about what this will do to us, to the company your grandfather built." "I have thought about it. For 12 years, I've thought about nothing but the family and the company. I worked 74-hour weeks. I lost my fiancée. I put my life on hold. And in return, I got 10% and a demotion." "It's not a demotion," Dad argued. "It's a realignment of responsibilities. Call it whatever you want. My decision is made." I left them standing in their perfect backyard, Mom already crying, Dad still holding my unopened resignation letter. It felt terrible. It also felt necessary. Monday morning, I began clearing out my office. Word spread quickly, and various staff members stopped by throughout the day, expressing shock and asking if I was sure about my decision. "Never been more certain," I told each of them with a sad smile. Paula appeared in my doorway around lunchtime, arms crossed defensively. "So you're just giving up? Running away because you didn't get your way?" "I'm making a career change based on new information," I replied, continuing to pack my books. She scoffed. "We'll be fine. Maybe even better without the tension." "I truly hope you are," I said sincerely. "Good luck, Paula." My formal exit interview with HR was scheduled for Wednesday. Linda, the HR director who had been with the company since my grandfather's time, seemed genuinely distressed. "Your father says you're just having a tantrum," she said carefully. "That you'll be back once you cool down." "Not happening," I assured her. When she asked about my reasons for leaving, I was honest. I explained the hours I'd worked, the promises made, and the reality of what had happened. Linda's professional demeanor cracked slightly. 74 hours a week? Consistently?" she asked, making notes. "Minimum," I confirmed. "Often more during crunch times. And you were salaried for 40 hours. She frowned. "That's potentially a labor law issue." "I'm not interested in pursuing that," I said. "I just want a clean break." By Friday, my office was empty. My projects transitioned as well as could be managed in such a short time. I turned in my keys and company credit card, shook hands with longtime colleagues, and walked out of Callahan Construction for what I believed was the last time. That first weekend of freedom was strange. I slept for 14 hours straight on Saturday, my body finally releasing years of accumulated stress. Sunday, I cleaned my apartment thoroughly, ordered takeout, and watched sports without checking my email once. It felt like both a liberation and a loss, like I'd shed a heavy burden but also cut off a limb. Sunday evening, my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Hello? Bryce." Dad's voice was tight with panic. "We need to talk. Now." Scott Westridge called. "He's threatening to pull their contract. $4.2 million, Bryce. We need you to call him first thing tomorrow." I leaned back on my couch, a strange calm washing over me. What happened? Paula had a meeting with him that didn't go well. Some technical questions she couldn't answer. She tried to smooth it over but made things worse. "He's asking for you specifically." "I see," I said. "And what does Paula say about this?" A pause. "She agrees we need your help. Just this once. Just this once." As if this wouldn't be the first of many fires they'd expect me to extinguish. "Let Paula handle it," I replied evenly. "She's the heir, right? She's better with people. Bryce, be reasonable. This is the family business at stake." "No, Dad. It's Paula's business now. You made that very clear." I'm sure she'll figure it out. I ended the call and turned off my phone, allowing myself a small, sad smile. The consequences were beginning, faster than even I had anticipated. Part of me felt guilty, but a larger part felt vindicated. They were finally seeing the value of what they had discarded so carelessly. Monday morning, I turned my phone back on to find 17 missed calls. 8 from Dad, 5 from Mom, 3 from Paula, and 1 from Frank, the CFO. I listened to the voicemails while making coffee. Dad's messages grew increasingly desperate. Call me back. Immediately progressed to, this is serious, Bryce. And finally to, please son, we need your help. Mom went straight for emotional appeals. Your father is beside himself. This isn't like you to be so selfish. We're family. Paula's messages were a mix of blame and pleading. This is partly your fault for not preparing me better. Followed by, I know I can fix this with your guidance. And finally, please, Bryce. I'm in over my head. Frank's message was the most straightforward. Westridge is walking. Paula promised timelines we can't meet and quoted specifications we can't deliver. Call me if you want details. I didn't call any of them back. Instead, I emailed Andrea, the headhunter, asking about the status of potential opportunities. Her response came within minutes, scheduling 3 interviews for me that week, including one with Sullivan Construction, Callahan's main competitor. Around noon, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced, eyes red from crying. You're not answering our calls, she said accusingly when I opened the door. I needed space, I replied, letting her in but not offering refreshments. This wasn't a social visit. Westridge canceled their contract this morning, she said, sitting on my couch. $4.2 million, gone. Your father had to take his blood pressure medication. I remained standing. I'm sorry to hear that. What happened exactly? Paula promised them changes to the design that weren't in the budget. When Scott asked technical questions, she couldn't answer them. Then she tried to charm her way through and offended him somehow. Mom shook her head. He said he'd only continue if you were put back in charge of the project. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Bryce, this could ruin the company. You have to help. No, Mom, I don't. Dad and Paula made a business decision. Now they're living with the consequences. How can you be so cold? This is your family. Yes. The same family that decided my 12 years of sacrifice was worth 10% and a demotion. I softened my tone, seeing her genuine distress. Mom, I gave everything to Callahan Construction, my time, my relationships, my health, and when the moment came to recognize that dedication, Dad chose Paula because she's better with people. Now you're seeing what happens when being good with people isn't enough. Mom left without the help she came for, but our conversation was interrupted twice by calls from Dad that she answered hurriedly, stepping onto my balcony to speak in hushed tones. Things were clearly deteriorating rapidly at Callahan Construction. Over the next week, I focused on my job interviews while receiving regular updates from my former colleague Trent, who texted me developments. Westridge officially canceled. Contract torn up. Paula tried to reduce their price to keep them, but Scott wasn't interested in price. He wanted competence. 2 days later, Riverfront Plaza project in trouble. Paula changed suppliers to save money. Materials aren't up to spec. City inspector flagged it today. Delays expected. Then, Paula hired her friend from college as project manager for the Mason Heights development. Guy has no construction experience. Permits filed incorrectly. Now we're back of the line for approvals. On Thursday, Frank called again. This time, I answered. 3 major contracts in jeopardy in less than 2 weeks, he said without preamble. This is a disaster, Bryce. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I partly meant it. Many good people worked at Callahan, and their livelihoods were now at risk. Your father is considering bringing in an outside consultant to replace you, Frank continued. I told him that's throwing good money after bad. No one knows this company like you do. I appreciate the vote of confidence. It's not confidence, it's math. We're headed for a financial cliff. He paused. Paula knows she's in over her head. She won't admit it to your dad. but she told me privately yesterday. That same afternoon, I had my interview with Sullivan Construction. James Sullivan, the owner, was refreshingly direct. "I've been trying to poach you for years," he said with a grin. "Never thought family loyalty would break down, but I'm glad it did. We need someone with your expertise." He offered me a position as director of operations with a salary nearly double what I'd made at Callahan, plus profit sharing and a clear path to partnership within 5 years. The offer was everything my father had implicitly promised, but never delivered. "I'll need a few days to consider," I told him, though my mind was already made up. "Take your time," James replied. "But not too much. Word's getting around about Callahan's troubles. The vultures are circling." That evening, Paula called again. This time I answered. "The Mason Heights development fell through," she said immediately, her voice tight with stress. "The permits weren't filed correctly. By the time we can reapply, they'll have moved on to another contractor." "That's 3 major contracts in 2 weeks, I observed, neutrally. "I know you're enjoying this," she snapped, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry. That's not fair. I'm drowning here, Bryce. What does Dad say? That I need to figure it out. That he gave me this responsibility, and I need to handle it." She gave a hollow laugh. Suddenly all his confidence in my people skills has evaporated. Despite everything, I felt a twinge of sympathy for my sister. She was in a position she hadn't earned and wasn't prepared for. Dad had set her up to fail as surely as he had set me up for disappointment. "What do you want from me, Paula?" I asked quietly. A long pause. "I want to fix this. I want to not be the person who destroyed our family's legacy." "That's not a request. That's a wish." "Fine. I'm asking for your help. Officially. Whatever terms you want." It was the first genuine thing she'd said to me in weeks. Unfortunately, it came too late. "I've already accepted another position," I told her, though I hadn't yet signed Sullivan's offer. "I'm moving on, Paula. You should figure out how to do the same." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. Finally, she whispered, "Dad's calling an emergency family meeting tomorrow night. Please come." I didn't commit one way or another before ending the call. Part of me wanted to ignore the request, to let them stew in the crisis they had created. But another part, the part raised on family loyalty and responsibility, couldn't quite shut the door completely. I was still weighing my options when Mom texted late that night. "Please come tomorrow. Whatever your decision after, we need to talk as a family one more time." It was the one more time that got me. It suggested she at least understood this might be the end of something, not just a bump in the road. With a sigh, I texted back a single word. "Okay." The family home looked different as I pulled into the driveway Friday evening. The usually immaculate lawn needed mowing, and Dad's prized rose bushes showed signs of neglect. Small things, but telling for a man who spent every Sunday morning on yard maintenance. Mom opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a tight hug. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The dining room had been transformed into an impromptu conference room. The elegant china was replaced by stacks of folders and printouts. Frank sat at the table reviewing documents, looking up with visible relief when I entered. "Where's Paula?" I asked, noticing her absence. "On her way," Mom said. She had to finish a call with the bank. Dad emerged from his study, looking a decade older than he had 2 weeks ago. His confident posture was gone, replaced by a slight stoop. He extended his hand formally, as if greeting a business associate rather than his son. "Thank you for joining us," he said stiffly. "Mom said it was important," I replied, shaking his hand briefly. We sat in awkward silence until Paula arrived 10 minutes later. She looked disheveled, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. She nodded at me but didn't speak, taking a seat opposite Frank. Dad cleared his throat. "We're facing a serious situation. Frank has prepared an assessment of our current position." Frank distributed copies of a financial report. "The bottom line is not good. With the loss of Westridge, Riverfront Plaza, and Mason Heights, we're looking at a revenue shortfall of $7.8 million over the next 18 months. Our current reserves will cover operations for approximately 5 weeks. 5 weeks? I echoed, genuinely shocked. The company should have at least 6 months of operating capital. Dad had the grace to look embarrassed. We made some significant investments in new equipment and expanded the office space in anticipation of the Westridge contract. Without a contingency plan? I asked incredulously. Paula was confident we could secure additional projects quickly, Frank explained diplomatically. All eyes turned to Paula, who stared down at the table. I thought my marketing background would make it easy to bring in new business, she said quietly. I didn't understand how much client confidence depends on our technical reputation. Mom reached over to squeeze her hand. You did your best, sweetheart. Her best might bankrupt the company, I pointed out, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Dad's jaw tightened. That's not helpful, Bryce. I'm not here to be helpful. I'm here because Mom asked me to come. So what exactly do you want from me? Dad exchanged glances with Frank, who nodded encouragingly. We need you to temporarily take over the major projects, Dad said, clearly struggling with each word. Just until we stabilize. Temporarily, I repeated. And then what? Back to technical director once the crisis is averted. No one answered immediately. Finally, Paula looked up, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I'm not cut out for this, she admitted. I never understood what Bryce actually did, the complexity of it, the attention to detail needed, the relationships that depend on trust and competence, not just charm. She turned to Dad. I pushed for this position because I was jealous of how much attention and approval Bryce always got. I thought if I had the title, I'd get the same respect. I was wrong, and I've put everything at risk because of my ego. Her honesty was unexpected and disarming. For a moment, I saw my little sister again, not the corporate rival she had become. Dad sighed heavily. We made a mistake, Bryce. I made a mistake. I thought leadership was about personality, not expertise. I was wrong. So what exactly are you offering? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Come back, Mom pleaded. Help save the company. We can discuss details after the immediate crisis is handled. That's not good enough, I said firmly. I need specifics. Role, compensation, ownership stake. Everything in writing before I consider returning. Frank cleared his throat. I've prepared some options for consideration, he said, sliding another document across the table. Based on market standards and the company's current situation. I scanned the document. The terms were better than before, but still inadequate given the circumstances. This isn't enough, I said, pushing it back. What would be enough? Dad asked, a hint of his old irritation creeping into his voice. I've received an offer from Sullivan Construction, I revealed. Director of Operations, twice my previous salary, profit sharing and partnership track. The shock around the table was palpable. Sullivan was not just any competitor. They were our oldest rival. You would go to Sullivan? Dad asked incredulously. After everything we've built together? You gave away what we built together, I reminded him. Now I'm looking at options based on my market value, not family obligation. Dad stood abruptly, pacing the room. This is blackmail. No, it's negotiation. Something you didn't bother with when you handed the company to Paula. Frank intervened before Dad could respond. What would your terms be, Bryce? If you were to consider returning. I laid out my conditions clearly. President position with 1% ownership, market rate salary with back pay consideration for unpaid overtime. Paula moved to a marketing role suited to her actual skills, and a written agreement about future succession planning. Dad's face reddened. 51%? That's control of the company. Yes, I agreed. Because whoever runs Callahan Construction needs the authority to make decisions without being undermined. We need time to consider this, Dad said stiffly. Take all the time you need, I replied, standing to leave. Sullivan's offer expires Monday. So does mine. I left them sitting around that table, surrounded by the evidence of their failed experiment. As I drove home, I felt no triumph, only a sad certainty that things could never return to how they were before. Whatever happened next, our family dynamics had been permanently altered. Sunday morning, Frank called to schedule a meeting at a neutral location, a private room at Riverside Restaurant. for 4 p.m. All parties would be present, including Callahan's lawyer, Kevin. It seemed they were ready to negotiate seriously. As I dressed for the meeting, I reflected on what I actually wanted. Yes, Sullivan's offer was excellent. But did I want to walk away from 12 years of building Callahan Construction? Did I want my family legacy to be division and collapse rather than growth and transition? The answers weren't as clear as they had been a week ago. Riverside Restaurant overlooked the water that gave our town its name. The private dining room was set with water glasses and notepads rather than food. A business meeting, not a family reconciliation. Frank and Kevin were already there when I arrived, reviewing documents. Mom and Dad entered moments later, followed by Paula. We exchanged stilted greetings before taking our seats. Kevin began with formalities, establishing that this was a negotiation session regarding my potential return to Callahan Construction. Frank then presented updated financial projections, showing the company could recover if key client relationships were restored quickly. "We've reviewed your terms," Dad said, folding his hands on the table. "Some are acceptable, others require adjustment." For the next hour, we negotiated point by point. The 51% ownership stake was the biggest sticking point, with Dad initially offering 40%. When I stood firm, reminding him of Sullivan's offer, he reluctantly agreed to 49% with provisional voting rights that effectively gave me control of major decisions. Salary negotiations were surprisingly straightforward, with Frank supporting my position that I had been significantly undercompensated. We settled on a market rate package, plus a one-time bonus that addressed some of the back pay concerns, without explicitly framing it that way, allowing Dad to save face. Paula remained quiet through most of the discussion, until we reached the point about her future role. "I have something to say about this," she interjected. She turned to face me directly. "Bryce, I owe you an apology. A real one, not a tactical one. I pushed for a position I wasn't qualified for because I was jealous of your relationship with Dad and the respect you had in the company. I thought the title would give me what you had earned through years of work." She took a deep breath. "I was wrong, and I nearly destroyed our family business in the process. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I understand what happened and my part in it." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. This wasn't the rehearsed Paula from the family dinner weeks ago. This was my sister, humbled and honest. "I accept your apology," I said simply. "As for my role," she continued, "I believe I do have valuable skills in marketing and client outreach. I'm good at making connections and presenting our work in its best light. I'm just not equipped to handle the operational and technical aspects. If you're willing, I'd like to work with you to define a position that uses my strengths without exceeding my capabilities." It was the most mature thing I'd ever heard her say. I nodded. "I think that's possible." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Dad cleared his throat repeatedly, emotion clearly making it difficult for him to speak. "I also owe you an apology," he finally managed. "I betrayed your trust and disrespected your contributions. I got caught up in the idea of a balanced leadership transition between both my children and lost sight of merit and qualification." He extended his hand across the table. "I'm sorry, son. Truly sorry." I shook his hand, feeling the calluses that matched my own. "Thank you for saying that." With the emotional barriers lowered, we made quick progress on the remaining points. Kevin drafted the agreement, which we all signed before dessert arrived. I would return as president of Callahan Construction the following Monday. Paula would become director of marketing and client relations, reporting to me but with autonomy in her specific domain. Dad would transition to an advisory role, available for consultation but no longer involved in day-to-day operations. As we prepared to leave, Dad pulled me aside. "Sullivan called me yesterday," he admitted. "They knew about our situation and wanted to buy us out at a fraction of our value." "That explains the generous offer they made me," I replied. "They were probably hoping I'd take their job and help them acquire Callahan at a discount." Dad nodded ruefully. "I almost deserved that outcome, but it didn't happen," I pointed out. "We're still standing." My first day back at Callahan Construction felt surreal. Employees greeted me with genuine enthusiasm, some even applauding as I walked to my old office, now mine again with President on the door. Trent grinned as he handed me an updated project list. "Welcome back, boss. Not gonna lie, it's been a mess around here. Let's fix it," I replied, rolling up my sleeves. The first priority was contacting Scott Westridge. He answered on the first ring. "Bryce Callahan," he said. "Heard you might be back in the saddle." "News travels fast," I observed. "I'd like to meet about reinstating our contract. The one your sister butchered? That'll cost you. How about I bring a revised proposal to your office tomorrow? No pressure, just an honest conversation about how we can make this work for both of us." He agreed, and by the end of the week, we had renegotiated the Westridge contract. It was slightly less profitable than the original, but still substantial. More importantly, it signaled to the industry that Callahan Construction was back on solid footing. Rebuilding took time. Paula proved surprisingly effective in her redefined role, approaching it with humility and a genuine desire to learn. She focused on marketing our technical expertise, rather than making promises she couldn't fulfill. We established clear protocols for proposals and client communications, ensuring technical accuracy while maintaining the polished presentation Paula excelled at creating. Dad struggled initially with his reduced role but found satisfaction in mentoring younger staff and handling community relations. Mom hosted a monthly family dinner that became a tradition again, though with more open communication and less hidden agendas. 6 months later, Callahan Construction had not only recovered, but was growing strategically. We had rehired key personnel who left during the crisis and added new talent in underserved areas. Our reputation for technical excellence and reliability was stronger than ever. At the half-year mark, we held a company barbecue to celebrate our recovery. As I stood watching employees and their families enjoying the sunny afternoon, Dad joined me by the grill. "You've done good work, Bryce," he said, handing me a cold drink. "Better than I could have at your age." "I had a good foundation to build on," I acknowledged. "And you learned from my mistakes." "That too." He looked across the lawn to where Paula was organizing a game for the employees' children. "She's finding her way too." "She is," I agreed. "We all are." The crisis had forced each of us to confront uncomfortable truths. Dad learned that good intentions don't override merit and fairness. Paula discovered her actual strengths, rather than chasing validation through titles. Mom found her voice in family discussions, rather than just mediating conflicts. And I learned that standing up for my worth didn't mean abandoning my values or my family. The company that emerged from this crucible was stronger, with clearer leadership, better defined roles, and more transparent communication. We still faced challenges, of course. Construction is never without its complications. But we faced them together, with respect for each other's contributions, and a shared commitment to the legacy my grandfather had started. The most valuable lesson I learned through this painful journey was that true self-worth can't come from others' recognition. It must be built on your own understanding of your value. When I finally stood firm and refused to accept less than I deserved, everything changed. Not just for me, but for everyone involved. So if you're giving your all to something or someone who doesn't appreciate your worth, remember that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, not as a punishment or manipulation, but as an act of self-respect. The right people will recognize your value and meet you where you deserve to be. And sometimes, those people might even be the same ones who failed to see it before. Have you ever had to stand up for your worth in your family or workplace? What happened when you finally drew that line? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Thank you for listening. And remember, you deserve to be valued for everything you bring to the table.